Do I ever buy brittle big keys? Yeah, I buy brittle books and slightly brittle books regularly. I don't have any problem buying them. And I'll tell you, one of the big reasons why is because I have had a number of books that I've sent in to get graded that have gotten brittle and slightly brittle, and I have flipped through those books and they are perfectly fine. Like they're like supple pages and everything, but there might be like even on a book that's classified as brittle, it might just be a small corner that's brittle, and the rest of the book is extremely um, well taken care of and clean and everything. And so I know some people have said that they would like CGC to change how they show brittleness on their when they're grading, like whether they have like some type of image that shows, like the brittleness is here on the cover, it's like this small amount, or if it's the whole thing. Because I have also had I had an all flash one that I was still able to flip through it, but when you turn the pages, you would occasionally see little pieces fleck off. And so that one was I knew was going to get brittle. But I've had other ones where I've been surprised that they got a brittle designation because it just didn't feel like anything was brittle to me when I was going through and grading that book. So there are massive ranges between just within brittle, where like CGC will say like just a small amount is brittle, but we mark the whole book as that. And so I have no problem buying brittle books. Now, if you're buying the book and you see like a whole bunch of like little pieces all throughout, the inside of the case, like maybe that's something you want to treat as like a little more of a warning sign. But on average, I've seen that it's often just a small portion of the book. Is there a way to humidify a book to reduce the brittle pages? Not there. There are ways to help brittleness on pages, but not ways that will not get you a restored or at least a conserved label. Um, if you are like when people are pressing books, they will humidify them, but that is not something that stays with the book forever. That goes away after you've effectively pressed the book. But there are ways to improve that. But yeah, you're going to get my understanding at least, you're going to get a restored or a conserved label. As old and fragile as these older books are becoming, we should reconsider restoration of comics. Yeah, and that's where like my Superman 2, I am sending that one I sent off to actually be conserved. I sent that to Sanderson Studios, and he's doing the conservation on that book. He's going to do some leaf casting on the cover so that you can, because it has a split spine, there's tape on it. He's going to remove the tape. He's going to reattach the cover, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I had bought that in my last unboxing video. I had the Detective Comics 38, first Robin, and that's a restored book. Like I mean, there's especially certain things where when you're talking about these really old Golden Age books, these rare books, these high value books, like restoration and conservation, I don't have nearly like I really don't have hardly any issue with. It's just because there's so few of them, you kind of you get what you can get. Like you're happy to have anything, and so whether it's restored or conserved or universal, doesn't matter quite as much. Now, I mean, Universal is always going to have the most value. There's no question about that. But with Golden Age, to me, it's much more acceptable. When you get to silver, bronze, modern, that kind of thing, I mean, there's just so many that's when the restoration becomes, to me, a much harder thing to justify. Conservation seems like a pricey or risky endeavor. Well, I mean, the Superman 2, I think he quoted me, it's like $250, something like that. It's not that bad. So for doing the leaf casting and the cleaning and removing tape and everything, like yeah, there are definitely some things that can be very expensive. I know Alex Comic Hoarder had a early Marvel Mystery Comics conserved, but he had every single page leaf cast, and that was very expensive. But if you're just looking at like the cover or something like that, or trying to reattach a centerfold, whatever it might be, it really doesn't seem that bad. Yeah, conservation is reversible. Not necessarily, because you can clean a book and it can be considered conserved, and you can replace staples and it can be considered conserved. Neither of those things, I believe, can be reversed. You can reverse the leaf casting, but there are some types of conservation that I believe cannot be reversed, and it's the cleaning and the staple replacement. There may be something else that I'm missing there, but I'm pretty sure it's those two. Would I rather have a trimmed book or a remaindered blue label? Probably trimmed. No, trimmed. Not probably. I'd rather have a trimmed book than a remaindered blue label. Um, I guess it depends on the overall appearance of the book, but yeah, remainder, you're getting a 0.5, and it's severely taking away from the appearance of the book. I mean, I do have one remainder book. I have a PEP 23, so second Archie. That's a remainder. But so like again, it's like certain rarity. You take what you can get. But in general, I would take a trimmed book over a remainder book all day. Just because to me, my biggest pet peeve for defects on a book is big pieces out of the front of the cover. That's the thing I generally try to avoid. And so that would be a big hit for me. Any recommendation to fix a detached centerfold? Um, well, some people will try to, like, if it hasn't completely torn the paper, like slip it back in under the staple, So there are ways you can maybe kind of reattach it, but uh, otherwise, generally, you'd have to either tape it in, or well, you wouldn't get a restored label for tape, but I wouldn't add the tape. You can get pretty high grades with centerfolds if that's your goal. If your goal is to grade the book, the highest grade I've ever seen with a with a detached centerfold is an 8.5. The typical, like if you look at ETA Nick's like grading card is like tip card, uh, he says it's a 7.0, but I have seen an 8.5. I remember when it sold on Heritage, that's what really caught my attention because it was outside of that range I was expecting. But typically, you can assume you can get at least a 7.0 if everything else is nice with a detached centerfold. So just something where you might not even need to reattach it. It might not, if the rest of the book is a certain condition already, it doesn't matter for the grade. Yeah, loose centerfold is not green. The only way you might get a green on a loose centerfold is if it was like a 9.8 or a 9.6 or even maybe a 9.0 copy and it had a loose centerfold. They might give you a green then, because, like I said, like you have certain flaws that are going to cap your grade, and so if you have something where you have a much nicer book than that flaw, then you might get a green label because the book is like looks like a 9.6, but it has a loose centerfold or a detached, not loose, but a detached centerfold. But if the book looks like a 7.0 and it has a detached centerfold, you might still get a 7.0. Dan, is there a company that reproduces things like missing centerfolds? I own a rare All Winners 2 or 21 that needs a sort of restoration. I'm actually, there are places that do complete like rebuilds of books. I mean, like when they're doing the color touch on the cover, I mean, they are, they have artists usually on staff that are redrawing that, and I believe it's very similar with the internal pages. They can do that similar type of work. Now, I don't know I don't know who does what. I know one that I've seen a lot, at least on Instagram, is Phantom Restoration. So you might want to check with them. They seem to do quite a bit of restoration work. But yeah, I've never had restoration done. I'm not that's not something I've ever gone down that route. Just the conservation. I haven't done the restoration where they're actually adding new color or anything like that to the books. Some of the older comics look really bad. Do you think some of these bad condition comics will worsen over time? If you mean like they look like they're in very poor condition, I mean that's all up to how you store them. Once you effectively, once you, not necessarily locking it in the case, but like if you just say have it in a mylar with either a full back or even better, like one of those plastic clear backing boards, and as long as you keep it in a temperature controlled area that doesn't have like a bunch of humidity or water or something, you're generally it's gonna pretty much stay the same condition, at least within human lifetimes. So if you're maintaining it like that, then it'll be fine. If you're storing them up in an attic that's cycling between 30 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit every year constantly, and it's just that's going to damage that book long term. But yeah, once you've kind of effectively locked it in a mylar or in a slab, you're generally not going to have much more deterioration on that book. I mean, that's why you can see white page books from the 40s. I mean, there are white page books from the 40s. I mean, books that are in pristine condition from the 40s. And so if it's possible to retain those books in that condition for 80 years, as long as you're storing them properly, you can. One of the ways that the Mile High collection was kept so high grade is, one, being in Colorado, so you've got that dry mountain air, but also I believe he stored his books in cedar chests, which pull a lot of that moisture away and keep any bugs away and all of that. And so, there are things that he did, that Edgar Church did as a collector slash hoarder, that kept those books in that pristine condition.